probably better than if you say, we're going to employ IP filtering at some central router element, okay? So they can probably understand that if you erase these elements or these answers from the DNS system, that's probably the best thing to do, or the easiest thing to do, okay? So, yeah. I don't want to access this website, but if some people want to, then they have to use different DNS servers, I guess. Okay, so if we go on. Okay, so as you can see, that was the first occurrence of DNS or of internet filtering in Germany at all. So it was only in North Rhine-Westphalia, and I think other states in Germany are not affected. But for instance, the scandal with all of mp3.com in Denmark, for instance, I think it's implemented in exactly the same way. Okay. So we come to the second part of this talk, and that's China. What I did for my master's thesis, I decided to go to China and actually check out in the network itself how it works. But I was, well, maybe I'm rather stupid, but I'm not insane, so I decided not to go to China directly, but rent a server. Okay, so I looked up in Google, how can I rent a server in China? And it was apparently relatively difficult, especially because I had to fill out export forms from the German customs and so on. And when I was I'm from a very small town, so when I did come to the bank and said, look, I need to transfer money to China, they were like, what? Okay, and then the next thing was, well, what do you need it for? Yeah, well, I need to pay a dedicated internet server. I rented it in China. They were like, what? Okay, so they were totally unaware of what I was trying to do. So I said, well, you know, on eBay I bought this MP3 player, and now I need to pay it. And they were like, okay, yeah, that was okay. So yeah, but I had to fill out this export form. And I guess they would have questioned me if there was more money to be transferred, but it costed, maybe if you're interested, it cost I think around $135 or something to rent a server. So in comparison to Europe, it's relatively expensive. But at least the server was directly connected to to China Telecom in Shanghai. So at least I was aware of the fact that, or I was sure that I was actually in China. Okay. So this saved me from going over to China, because if you have ever seen a Chinese public bathroom, then you do not want to see Chinese prisons, you know. So I decided it's better to stay in Europe and to do all this stuff from here. Okay, basically, when we take a look at the internet in China, we have to take a look at what's called the OpenNet Initiative's internet filtering map. You can go to the website of the OpenNet Initiative, and you can get a flash thingy where it basically says all the countries. And although this talk is centered around China, it also holds true for countries like Thailand, Egypt, Iran, Vietnam, and all these kind of countries where there's internet filtering employed. And you can see there are different levels of filtering. Here in China, the actual level of filtering is truly pervasive. But for instance, when you would look up this for Germany, you would at least still get that Germany is on the watch list. Okay, so that's still a very interesting map, and it's frequently updated. Maybe you take a look at the numbers before we get into the guts. In China, they have at the moment, and that was from June 2006, around 130 million internet users. So that's actually the second largest number of internet users in the world. And it's only outbalanced by the United States of America. But as they have a growth of 20% per year, it is assumed that in a couple of years they will be the number one internet users in the world. Okay, and the best thing is these 130 million users, approximately, they're only about 9 or 10% of China's entire population. Okay, so there's a lot of people that still want to go on the internet, and I'm interested to see how the filtering continues with this rapid growth of user base, basically of the number of users. Okay, so if we come to what's actually blocked in China, there are actually some laws of what to block, basically. What you have to block is basically you have to block everything that's in some way contrary to the public belief, or at least not the public belief, but the belief that the state has. Okay, so everything that might subvert social security or social order is forbidden. For instance, you cannot say something against the constitution, you cannot say something that might destroy the unity of the country, you cannot say something that has to do with social stability, you cannot do something against, or cannot say something which involves gambling, violence, murder, and so forth. Okay, as you can see, this is very broad, and I think they did this on purpose because obviously, well, what does destroying the unity of the country mean? It could mean anything. When I was preparing my paper in June, July, and August of this year, there was a guy that was arrested because he apparently published contrary stuff or subversive information from a Yahoo account in Hong Kong, which apparently is a different country, but that doesn't matter really because Yahoo gave the information to the Chinese authorities, and that guy was imprisoned for 10 years for subverting the social order. So as you can see, there's a lot of information that is actually being censored in China. Okay, so if we take a look at the domain name system in China, basically, what I did, I decided, okay, how can you determine how the actual filtering is performed in China? So I said, okay, why not use a server in Germany and also a server in China, and then do DNS resolution on one server and DNS resolution on the other server and compare the results. Okay, so I created a sample data set of about 50 domains, which I thought that they would be filtered. That included stuff like CNN, the Playboy, and so forth, and various newspapers and television channels. And I wanted to know, are they blocked in Germany and are they blocked in China? And apparently about 20% of all the domains were blocked in China, but none of them were blocked in Germany. Okay, so if we take a look at the actual table that I came up with, you have stuff like Amnesty, which is a human rights organization, or Falun Dafa, which is a spiritual movement. You will see that actually the Chinese DNS servers fail to actually resolve those names. Okay, so if you try to look up Wikipedia, you will actually get an error when doing the DNS resolution. Okay, so the same holds true for Greenpeace or Playboy or various other websites. But interestingly, there are some websites where there is like the government of Taiwan and World Press, where you can get worldwide news articles that are basically not answered at all. Okay, so you will run into a timeout if you try to resolve these domains. So sometimes they do server failures, and otherwise, for other domains, they don't answer your requests at all. Okay, and again, to illustrate this, I have a little flash demo. Hopefully we can all see this because I have a different resolution originally on my laptop. Okay, but at least you can see the left part, which is the important bit. Okay, so we have a Chinese server and a German server here, and I'm going to do the same. I'm going to do a host lookup of a certain domain on the left-hand side in China, on the right-hand side in Germany. You will see that, for instance, here I tried to resolve a domain called Falun Canada, which is the Canada appearance of Falun Dafa, a spiritual movement which is forbidden in China. And you will see that actually he tries to resolve, maybe I can stop this for a second, it gets a bit weird. Okay, so just to ensure that you all understand what happens. Basically is, okay, we have a website called, for instance, falunginfo.info, and you try to resolve the name in China. It first works, but then there's an error injected into your current connection, so which leads to what they call a serve fail. Okay, so basically you as a user end up not being able to communicate with this host because the DNS resolution does not work. Okay, and on the German server there's no problem because all the domains are repeatedly resolved. Okay, is that clear to everyone? Or basically what they do is they basically fake DNS replies. Okay, so they watch out for your DNS requests, and as you do them, they're actually faked. Okay, so if we continue this this little demo, I'm doing a request on the left-hand side. You will see, interestingly, that first of all you get the right IP address, but then you get a serve fail error, so you won't be able to connect to this host. And on the German server, it's no problem to connect to this. The same holds true for the BBC, and in the German server, it's no problem to resolve this domain. On the Chinese server, you will get a server failure message. Okay, and there are some domains, I think it comes now, and yeah, well, Free Tibet I think works, partially at least. But then if you go to certain domains, let's say, I think it now comes up with the government of Taiwan. First Amnesty, okay, Amnesty doesn't work either. But if you come up now with the government of Taiwan, yeah, you will see that there is no answer at all. Okay, so the packets are silently dropped as they go along. Okay, so it says no servers could be reached, and the same goes for peacehall.com, which is a website about the peace movement. And whereas in Germany there's no problem, in China you can't resolve the domain. Okay. So that's a very basic level of how to block people, or of how to prevent people from accessing certain domains. Obviously, you can say, well, I have the IP address for Amnesty now, so I can just try to connect to them, no problem. But the trick is that beside DNS filtering, they also employ IP filtering. Okay, so they basically, in the central router elements, access to those websites will also be blocked. So not only do you have DNS filtering, but you have also IP-based filtering. So although you can maybe resolve the domain by using a DNS server in Germany, you are still unable to connect to these websites. Okay. Okay, so here's an interesting picture I took. And the reason why I wanted to create another one with the CCC in it, but I didn't have the time last night. So basically, this is something I created to play a little trick with my professor, or with the assistant professor. That was in my final presentation for the masters. I basically took the Chinese version of Firefox. I did go to google.cn. I created two queries, an invalid and a valid, and I basically took two pictures and merged them into one. So now it appears that if you search in China for Dublin City University, no results do come up. And as we have a lot of Chinese students, the professor like, okay, how can we get actually students from over there if we're not found? Okay, which is obviously very insane because I faked this picture. But he wasn't. He never questions the picture, you know, because he thinks, well, that's Google, and what they give to me must be real. But apparently it's not. It's faked. Okay, and because we all do trust in a certain way, the search engines, I'd say they are a big vector for adversaries to filter content. And apparently they do this with two ways. First, you can do what they call, or what's referred to as website delisting. So what you do in your result is basically you just take out certain websites that you do not want to appear. So there was a very good website in America where you could actually use the Chinese version of Google against the American version of Google. And if you search for certain events, then in China you will get flowers, and in the American version you will get tanks. So that's one way of doing filtering. And the other thing is you can do keyword censorship. So that means you can just simply deny the fact, or deny people the ability to search for certain content. And that's a technique which is heavily employed. All the major search engines in China are filtered. It could be Amazon, Yahoo, Google, Baidu, and all these other search engines. They're all filtered, and well, they have the extent of the filtering varies from search engine to search engine. But basically, the bottom line is that you cannot trust them because they're all filtered. Okay, so what you can do is when you're doing web browsing, a very weird experience happens. Basically, what happens is, okay, you as a user are here, number one, and you try to access a certain target over here, okay? And what you can do, or what happens actually, is as you send your request from number one to number 4 to the target system, basically what happens is your entire connection will be watched out by the Chinese government, and if there are certain keywords in your connection, then basically the connection will be zapped. It will be dropped immediately in real time. Okay, I have no idea on how many protocols this is actually done. I know it's done for HTTP, and if you Google for it, if you read Wikipedia, it's apparently done for instant messaging as well, and I think for other protocols too, but I'm not quite sure for all, whether it's done for all protocols or just for the majority of protocols. I'd say it's done for HTTP, probably for some instant messaging, and for some other ones as well, but we have to figure it out. So what happens is, I send my request as the user, the adversary, so the Chinese government basically observes the connection, and if it's unencrypted, and if there is a certain keyword present in my request, then the connection is dropped immediately. And I have a little demo, and the way it works is basically they insert forged reset packets into the connection. So because they observe the connection and then they say, oh, there's keyword X, then they send a reset packet to me, but also to the server. So the server thinks I quitted the connection, and I think the server quitted the